Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in. On behalf of Mitchell Kaplan and all of us at Books and Books in Miami, Florida, I welcome you to a virtual evening with Beto Arcos to discuss music stories from the Cosmic Barrio, a collection of 150 stories about music from all over the world. Born in Jalapa, Veracruz, Mexico, Beto Arcos is a radio journalist and music curator based in Los Angeles. He's a regular contributor to NPR, BBC Radio 3, and KPCC, who writes and produces stories about music from all over the globe. To moderate tonight's conversation, we're joined by none other than the great Jackson Browne. Jackson Browne has written and performed some of the most literate and moving songs in popular music and has defined a genre of songwriting charged with honesty, emotion, and personal politics. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2004 and the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2007. Throughout this evening's broadcast, you're invited to ask questions by clicking the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen, and you can order your copy of Music Stories from the Cosmic Barrio from Books and Books below by pressing the green button. We appreciate each and every order and the generous donations from viewers everywhere. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guest to the virtual stage. Hello, Beto.
Hi, Christina. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Wonderful.
Welcome, welcome.
Hi, Christina. Hi, Beto.
Hi, Jackson. How are you?
Really good, good. I'm really glad to see you.
So glad to see you as well, and happy to know that you're doing well. I can't thank you enough for joining me tonight in this presentation for Books and Books in Miami. First, I guess I do want to tell you a little bit about how this book came to be, I guess.
Yeah.
It's something that happened in the last 6-8 months because of the situation that we're in. I thought I have been wanting to do a book, and I've been thinking, should it be about interviews or should it be about stories that I've done over the years? And as Christina mentioned, I've been doing stories for NPR, for the BBC, and for here for Los Angeles KPCC, as well as you know.
And for years on KPFK.
On KPFK for so many years, as music director, and then hosting a program there where I've talked to you a couple of times as well. And I thought maybe the best thing to do is to share the stories that I've done over the last couple of decades, and put them together, edit them, and then separate them into sort of sections or chapters to create a narrative.
It's a great idea because though I'm a huge fan of your programs, I haven't heard all of them, and it's great to have a reference book. This is a very interesting book, and an interesting way of laying it out, because these are both introductions to a whole lot of bands, but also it's like an index. It's an index of all the music there are people in there that I didn't, know you had talked to, that I already know about, and so many people that by reading about, I want to go check out. So it's a great book, and a very unusual format.
Thank you. The idea behind the sections, because there are, as you said, 150 stories in one book. It's a lot of stories. I decided to create sort of thematic narratives, sort of to help readers see beyond music, because after all, as you know, musicians create from their environment, from their references that they have, from experience in life. And over the last 2 to 3 decades, in the years that I've traveled throughout Latin America, especially in the last decade, and also in Europe, in the Caribbean, I've found stories that are really compelling, that have to do with different ways in which people create music.
Yeah.
And so I created these narratives. So there's a chapter on specifically focused on identity. There's another one focused on the power of women. There's another one on learning or education. Another one on immigration. And for example, there's another one specifically on Cuban music and the diaspora, and then another one on Brazil. And that's sort of the idea behind it, is that I wanted to kind of help people, see the different ways in which music is created.
I gotta admit that I'm glad you're telling me this, because I didn't, the order that you just described totally escaped me. To me, it's like a kaleidoscope. I'm looking at this book. Of course, I have the very peculiar habit of reading books from the back to the front. Maybe because I'm right-handed, and I don't know what I flip through a book backwards, so I generally start at the back, but yeah, it's just amazing that as you flip through this book, you see Sylvia Perez Cruz, who I've heard sing in Spain, or Buica, who I've heard in Los Angeles. These are unusual people that I never would have found in LA. I didn't hear them on your program, but I know about them, and it's amazing to me that they're in this book. So I have a feeling, everything that I do know about in this book are some of my favorite things, but also there's just so much more. But like I say, to me, I'm sure that, it's great to know that you have a plan. You've got sort of an order to these stories, and I see it now in the what do they call it? A frontispiece, which is usually pretty much the last page I ever look at. and yeah, maybe the last page is actually the forward. Anyway, tell me, did you go to see Buica when she played in Los Angeles?
Yes, I did. A few times, actually. She's come to LA about 4 or 5 times. I missed, I think, one concert of hers, the last one, but I got a chance to see her a couple of times, and one of those times she came to KPFK, and I interviewed her live in studio.
Yeah. Well, you're really you're a beacon for Latin musicians coming to Los Angeles. You're the one sure interview, the one thing that you have to, like, if it's Carlos Varela or if it's Gorda Barranco, it's like, well, we have to go talk to Beto, and this is why I know you. But Concha Buica is really unusual. She's an unusual because she's from Andalusia, and she's a flamenca, but she's black. She's from an African immigrant family living in flamenco territory in a part of Spain that is basically, gypsy, and so she's already a hybrid, and then she has the prowess of one of those born stars, one of those born singing phenomenons, and so I was really pleased to see her in LA, where you don't see a lot of flamenco.
Yeah, her story is quite unique in the book. There's two parts to Buica's story. One has to do with a record that she did with Chucho Valdés, the great Cuban pianist,
right,
where they reimagined Mexican rancheras. And
I didn't know.
Can you imagine Chucho Valdés playing piano and Buica singing with that sort of flamenco soul,
doing Mexican rancheros,
Mexican rancheras. Yeah, well, and she said to me the reason why she is so in tune, she's so close to these songs, is because when she was growing up in Mallorca with her parents that had just migrated there from Equatorial Guinea, which was a former colony of Spain in Africa, her mother used to listen to Chabela Vargas.
Wow.
And to Jose Alfredo Jimenez and all these Mexican singers.
There is a whole strain of Mexican music that goes to flamenco by way of Diego del Gastor. The little community of Morón de la Frontera has this patriarch named Diego del Gastor, and if you listen to the flamenco from there, It sounds very Mexican. Then it also has a I think it's an Air Force base or an Army base in that town, Morón de la Frontera. And so a lot of GIs from the US learned flamenco in this particular bar that Diego would play in. And he'd let them bring their tape machines, and his music is sublime. And it's really, he's the guy that would he almost never let anybody film him, and he would not even show up at a festival. He thought he was going to get, because it was that same thing where like some of these great Chicago blues masters would like see somebody really paying attention, and they'd turn their back so you couldn't see what they were doing. They couldn't see your hands, and he was like that. But nonetheless, there's a whole strain of people who learn flamenco. I mean, a whole generation of people who learn flamenco there in Morón de la Frontera, and there was a great band called Son de la Frontera, which is made up of his descendants, some of his grand nephews and family members. And my good friend Raul Rodriguez was in that band, the only Peyo.
Right. Which brings me to something that has to do with you and this project, one of the most recent projects you've been involved with, Let the Rhythm Lead. And this is a good reason to bring it up because we're in Miami. Yeah. And you know, this is probably the city that has the largest Haitian community outside of Haiti. So you did an album with Raul, with Jenny Lewis, and others called Let the Rhythm Lead, Haiti Song Summit Volume 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that project. Very interesting combination of some of the former members of Human Experience, Paul Beaubrun is in there, and others. La Musique.
La Musique. It was the band La Musique, which means roots. It sort of means roots music in Haitian Creole. They're from Jacmel, and that's where the recording studio was. And this came about because some of us had traveled to Haiti to view the work that was being done, that has been done there over the last 10 years. By a group called Artists for Peace and Justice. And they built a school after the earthquake. They built it in record time. They got through all the red tape. They weren't stopped by any of the bureaucratic problems that most NGOs had. And they built a school in record time. And they also built a recording studio and a film school. And the main campus is in Port-au-Prince, the big city there. But the film school and the recording school were about 2 hours up the coast, 2.5 hours up the coast in this town of Jacmel, which has a history of having arts festivals and a tremendous amount of artists working there. And the guy that sort of built that school had put on film festivals and art festivals with the community there, and has a house there, a man named David Bell, a wonderful, wonderful guy who's really the patron of the whole project. But we had the idea of coming there because I went there to look at their studio, which was a brand new studio. And matter of fact, it was built by Quincy Jones and Lionel Richie for the We Are the World Foundation, and in conjunction with APJ, Artists for Peace and Justice. Anyway, I looked at the studio and thought, well, this is great. They're going to have these young students who are in rural Haiti learning to be recording engineers and fulfilling their dreams. And what they need is people to come from the outside world, not only for the local groups to use the studio, but for people to come from everywhere and demonstrate the way they make music. And so that was the beginning of the idea. And what we weren't trying to make a record. We were trying to like have just a kind of a seminar, a demonstration. But we got rolling, and among the people I asked were Raul Rodriguez from Son de la Frontera and what is that? Razón de Son, and Habib Kouyaté. Habib Kouyaté, who's a good friend of mine, actually was in Haiti a few months before that, and the studio called me and said, we know Habib is here. Do you think he will come visit us in the studio? And Habib will go anywhere. He's really he's such a great musician. He's such a great statesman. So Habib is from Mali, and I visited Habib in Mali. So he signed on. He said he would come. The way we did it, just so you know, we couldn't use any of the school's money. I mean, I wouldn't think of using money that was for the students' education and for the school to have, like, this kind of expensive kind of excursion to Haiti. And I was able to do it by, you see, you have a program called Charitable Dollars in the United States where you can take your tickets, the ticket price, you can take $1 off your ticket price and donate it tax-free to anyone with a 501c3 tax distinction. And so we had raised the money, so we were able to pay. We were able to fly, Habib from Mali and Raul from Spain. And we also had Paul Beaubrun. And here's the thing: that the Haitians we got to play with. Paul Beaubrun is from Haiti and from there, and he's very well known in Haiti and plays there. And he lives in New York, and his English is perfect. He was the bridge. He was the stepping stone. He was the link between all the rock musicians and the Spanish musicians and the African musicians to be able to communicate with the Haitian musicians who really only speak Haitian Creole. You think they all speak French in Haiti. They don't. French is a second language. Spanish is a third language. But they really speak Haitian Creole, and it's not French at all. I mean, it's based on French, but the thing is that this school is filled with these really, really passionately interested students of music and of engineering, and the prospect they would all be the money earner at home. They would all be helping their families survive from day to day, and their family is doing without them to let them be there in attendance of this school. It's like going away to college. I mean, it's a serious, serious school. And when I asked them, they asked me to, well, that's a picture of the assembled band, and you see this guy on the top with the djembe. His name's Luxon, and here you see Habib on the left, and this guy on the right is an engineer, Jenny Lewis, Jonathan Russell, who is from the band The Head and the Heart, and below him, Jonathan Wilson, who was a indie producer and really kind of he plays in Roger Waters' band, and he's a very, very in demand producer of indie bands. And the guy sitting down in front, Zamba Zhao, who is a kind of voodoo music patron. He's the lead. He's the sort of patron of the group La Musique. La Musique they just said they would hang with us. They would just like stay close by while we made our record, and we called them in as we needed them. We would, and right away at the beginning of this project, and I'm gonna stop talking about it because it was one of the most thrilling experiences of my life. But and I could spend the whole hour talking about them, but. They did a gig the night before we started. It was just right up the coast, like literally 100 yards, 200 yards away. And it was the most amazing music. And Jonathan Wilson was standing there saying, okay, we got to have that guy. We got that one. Okay, that girl was saying at the beginning, we want her. We got to have her. And so we just picked our favorite people. And or the people that made the biggest impression on us, right? But in the end, we wound up working with the whole band. Now they just were nominated for I don't know if they were nominated for a Grammy. They were up for consideration. So was this album. But La Musique did the band a record recently called Haiti Nola, which is a fantastic,
beautiful record.
People don't realize that New Orleans was populated by free people from Haiti because their revolution happened just before. It was like in the end of the 1800s that they began. They had a huge influx of free people from Haiti to New Orleans, and they were the artists and the shop owners, the people who free people with property in a southern United States city, and they're very much responsible for the incredible fusion and the incredible energy with which music got made in New Orleans and defined jazz and the real joining of African and American musicians.
Since we're in the Caribbean and and we're also in Miami. I guess I really want to talk about Cuban music, and specifically about an artist that both, he's your friend, he's my friend for many years. He came to Los Angeles for the first time when he performed at the New School through Ned Sublet. You probably know Ned Sublet, who organizes.
I've read his book. I don't know Ned, but I've read his book.
Music in Cuba. Essential required reading. If there was something to require, that's one to require reading. Ned Sublet, who had a record label called Cuba Disc back in the late 80s and early 90s, contacted me just after I had started working at KPFK, and he says, "Hey, Beto," he's Texan. He's from Lubbock, Texas. Says, "Hey, Beto, Carlos Varela." I said, "Yes, of course I know him." He says, he wants to come to LA. Can you help us, get a gig there? And I said, well, let me see.
Did you help him get that gig at Luna?
What's that?
Did you help him get that gig at Luna?
Yeah, Luna Park.
Yeah, he told me about that. Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, I remember that thing.
So I called, Luna Park, and I said, hey, here's an artist that has, this incredible following, and I know you can fill at least one night. They called because they wanted a second night. They had sold out the first night. And he just wanted to come. I actually got Carlos a guitar from a friend because I don't know if he told you the story. His guitar was stolen in New York.
Oh yeah, I heard.
He had played, the gig at the New School. The guitar was stolen from the car that he was in. Anyways, he came to LA. He says, "Beto, I need a guitar." I said, "Oh, I can get you a guitar. That's not a problem." But he wanted a good guitar, so I said, "Okay, I don't have a really good guitar. I'm gonna have to get you a friend's." So I got him a Takamine from a friend. So, but anyway, that friendship actually started before, because I had gone to Cuba, which actually is in the book. I had gone to Cuba for the first time in 1995 to explore the music scene, and I did a story for an NPR program about rock in Cuba, which, as you probably know, during this period, rock in Cuba was banned. It was not okay to play rock in public. Instruments were basically impossible to find unless you had a friend from the US who brought you an electric guitar. A lot of musicians used, this is another aspect of the story that was, I thought, interesting, is that they were scrambling to get parts for the guitar, including picks, strings, etc. So I met Carlos Varela at the Hotel Nacional. He brought me his album Como los Peces, and when I listened to that, I can't tell you the impact that album had on me when I heard it. Fast forward, you meet Carlos Varela in Havana at the Music Bridges, right? As the Music Bridges.
No, I didn't meet him there. I didn't go to Havana on Music Bridges, but everybody who did go came back and said, "You got to meet this guy."
Okay.
I went on a separate trip sometime later. There were that Music Bridges there. You were supposed to go there and write a song with a Cuban and then sing it in the National Stadium a week later. And I can't. I don't think I can write a song in a week, or certainly not, and be knowing that I have to perform it in a week. I mean, I might be able to, but I might not. And so I didn't go. But everybody, Bonnie Raitt went, J.D. Souther went, Don Was went. Hey, it was an amazing, that music business thing was a really good idea. I think that, lots of American musicians went, and Don Was there, Michael Franti. Incredible bunch of people. And they all came back talking about Carlos Varela. And what our viewers should know is that he is really like the voice of not only his generation that came to prominence in the 90s, just as the sort of alliance with the Soviet Union was falling apart and everything was kind of called into question about their very, existential. It was a very existential moment for them. But he also speaks for the youth. he also poses very, very good questions to people, to older people who, and his song, like William Tell, probably sums up his attitude, his stance. He's got a song called Guillermo Tell, and in the song he says, William Tell, your son wants to know why. Maybe it isn't time to put the apple on your head. Your son wants to be the one to shoot the apple off, shoot the bow. And he spoke for a generation that wanted to participate and take a role in the affairs of the Cuban state and the government. And it was considered, cheeky and like it was considered like unhelpful by the government. But I think most of he's adored by youth and by all the people. So yeah. It was ironically, of course, they began denying him visas, even though he was somebody that was no cheerleader for the revolution. I mean, he doesn't show up for government functions like all the other great Cuban artists do. Silvio Rodriguez and others. But nonetheless, the Miami Cubans look at it like, well, if you're still in Cuba, then you're like propping up the Cuban regime. So by their way of thinking, you're not a Cuban unless you've left.
Yeah.
And by
but
his
in all
way
fairness, that's changing, and that has been changing for a while. There's a couple of younger generations that have said no. The embargo didn't work. This is silly. And in fact, it's important that you mentioned that, because with the time that Carlos Varela came to Los Angeles that first time, he was supposed to do a show in Miami and he couldn't do it. Why? Yeah. Because the promoter that organized the show had been involved in taking a group of Cuban Americans to Havana to be in a Carlos Varela concert. And apparently she had done it through the offices of Univision. She was fired. It caused a major uproar, and Carlos couldn't play a gig in Miami.
Yeah.
So
he ended up playing. Well, I'm sorry to interrupt.
He ended up playing at the home of the promoter, Maria Romeo, who was at the time his manager.
These are the kinds of things that happen to Carlos. He's really always in the middle of a maelstrom. He winds up going to Congress in the United States with a guitar and going, down the hallway and singing in various offices. The thing is that if you just like you said, when you first heard his songs, you go, oh my God, this is the same. I'd taken him to a concert at the Pete Seeger, Pete Seeger, the concert, I can't remember the name of it right now, on the Hudson, the festival for the, not Riverkeeper, but anyway. And I had a translator standing by in case he wanted to speak to the audience. And she was from New York, but she was a young person who'd never heard him. And she's standing there listening to him. She's probably 18 or something. She's a volunteer at this festival. And she's going, oh my God. Who is this guy? Where did he come from? These songs are incredible.
Yeah.
And this happens the same. I was in the audience in Miami listening to somebody listening to him and I had been doing concerts where I would participate, and I would help, just in some communities where they don't know him, I would help introduce him and do a song with him. In Miami, there's no need for that. And in New York, there's no need for that. But I was in the audience in Miami, and there was same thing. There was a journalist from Panama saying, and a young guy saying, this guy's a major, like, what is, So that's the thing about Carlos Varela, is he's undeniably eloquent. When he steps off the plane in Miami, he's got to have a press conference. He's not, because they all want to know, why are you still living there? Or they want to know, like, when are you going to move here? Or like, oh, what are you doing? Does this mean you're coming here to try to stay? And that's always the issue. I mean, the thing to know is that he doesn't want to leave Cuba. He wants to live in Cuba, and he wants to travel the world. He wants to be able to sing in the United States. So you're being the person that he would come to talk to in LA. We had members of Ozo Motley helped promote a show of his, here at the Echoplex in Los Angeles. People have stepped forward to try to present his music. And at the same time, maybe you could tell me, because I always thought that he should be really huge in LA because of his eloquence in the Spanish language. And that I mean, I would think like, well, how are we going to promote him? We should go to LACC and we should go to the Latin student groups, you know, and really promote him that way. But I mean, you're the one who occupies this place in Latin music in LA. Like I say, you're like a beacon. So, but for so many people, for so many artists.
Thank you. No, I'm just happy to lend a hand because, like I said, when someone calls you and they ask you for help, I'm ready to help if I can. And that time I was already building my name as someone in LA, and I just called the club and I said, here's this artist. And luckily the LA Times did a story about him, so that helped to sell tickets. La Opinion did a story about him, so that helped to sell tickets. So it's basically, you know, that's how it works. Before we go, because we're almost at the end of our conversation here, before we start taking questions.
Oh, wait. Yeah, please. Yeah, you go.
I do want to, you know, ask you a couple of things. One of them, you grew up in Highland Park,
right?
And then Fullerton High School. And I was listening to a song which I really want to tell you this right now so everybody can hear it. The first time that I heard you was in Boulder, Colorado.
Really?
Now, I lived in Boulder, Colorado as an undocumented immigrant in the mid-1980s. I'm happy to say that. And I was working in somebody's shop, you know, and they would turn on, I'm sure you know, KBCO. I'm sure you know that station, because it's the station that created the AAA phenomenon. Dennis Constantine, I'm sure you know who he is.
Yeah.
And they would play your music a lot. And I started to tune in to your sound, to your quality, to your voice. And then I heard this song that really touched me, which I think is called Lawless Avenues.
Yeah.
And I heard something that really, I said, KBCO is playing a song with Spanish lyrics? And I said, okay, well, who is this artist anyway? And of course, it was Jackson Browne.
Yeah, I wanted to write a song about that. You know, the Avenues were a gang, as you know. I mean, Highland Park now has two gangs, the Avenues and also the HB boys, you know, Highland Park, HP. But when I lived there, it was really basically one gang lived in Highland Park, and they called themselves after the streets that went from about Avenue 52 or 50 up to Avenue 64. And it was this, you know, the Avenues like, but I grew up knowing the names of every gang in LA. I was too young to drive. I just heard these names talked about, you know, Rose Hill, White Fence, you know, Frogtown, Dogtown, you know, all this like Clover. And Highland Park was the sort of, it was the sort of bridge between Lincoln Heights, which was all Latino, and Eagle Rock, which is pretty white. And it was the sort of battleground. Highland Park was a battleground in that. And I wasn't, you know, part of any gang activity at all. You had to know this. You have to know. If someone walks up to you and says, "Where are you from?" You know, it was a question like, it was really, they're saying like, where are your allegiances? And you had to know how to answer that question. You know, I wanted to write a song about it because, and the stories in the song were stories that I heard. You know, there was a guy that had been killed at a party, and both gangs, that he was from one gang, and both gangs loved this guy, both people. And I knew a guy. Okay, I spent, like, when I was about 11 or 12, I spent a summer with a kid who was hiding out with his cousins, who were my best friends. This guy Nano his family was from a gang that was from another part of town, and he was, for some reason, he couldn't be at home. He was hiding from them, and he was staying in this other territory with his other cousins, you know, and just the whole knowledge that so many of these gangs have, like, they're generational. And that's what was really built into that song, the idea that that these allegiances repeat through time, through multi-generations. And the song, you know, the idea that this guy was stabbed, you know, at a party, and everybody mourned him. Everybody mourned the loss of this guy. Everybody liked this guy, but somebody who didn't know him killed him. Not the kid I spent the summer with. That guy, that was a sort. He was in trouble for staying with his family members who were from the opposite gang. It's like, it was a heavy spot for him to be in. I guess they rectified it in the long run, yeah. But you know, it was like, anyway, that's a page from my life. I lived there until I was about 13, and then my family moved to Orange County. Really, to get me out of that, to get me out of the. One day, my father, you know, turned me upside down and shook me, and out came a dog chain and his straight edge razor, and he said, "Okay, it's time for us to move." You know, I was like, so and a pack of what he thought were his cigarettes, but they were mine. Anyway, it was
great story. Great story.
When I went to Orange County, none of that was available to me, because out there in Fullerton and Placentia, the gang stuff was absolutely more pronounced. It was so heavy that, like, there was no entrance for some skinny white kid, one on Bivato. You know, there was no way to, like, communicate with anybody. I became a surfer.
And a songwriter.
Yeah. And there's that thing in the second verse where you say, my favorite line is like, you know, Manuelito, Sister Rosa, fell in love with a surfer from Hermosa. You know, and there was this friend of mine who does the tagging. Oh, now I'm going to forget his name for a second. No. Well, he said, you know, it's true. It's true. Always that we go to parties and there's always some gabacho in the closet, man. There's always some guy, some white guy that is going out with somebody's little sister, and I think. That's me. I was always in love with these Mexican girls, but in a way over my head, in a culture that
Is that how Linda Paloma came about?
Linda Paloma was because I spent
a beautiful bolero. It's a bolero ranchero in English, which I had never heard before.
Yeah. Well, I fashioned that out of some months of going to hear mariachi sing in Los Angeles with the one who that song is about. It's really a fable. It's not really about her, but my first wife was somebody that I went to a lot of. She had a favorite song, Paloma. Oh, I'm gonna forget that now.
Paloma Blanca.
Cucuru Paloma.
Cucuru. Oh, yeah, of course, classic.
Paloma, you know, I mean, we would go and listen to mariachi sing, and she would always request these songs, and they would very happily sing it to her, because she'd learned this song in Mexico at some beach, and she was, you know. Whereas my father's favorite song was, my father would request La Borrachita, the little drunk girl.
Yes.
So and we always had this repertoire of songs that we would ask for, and you know, Mexican music in LA. There are the Mexican stations and playing Latin music, and then I mean, apart from KPFK, but there's also the country western stations. So there's a deep regional sort of music going on, and of course the R&B and the, you know, the black stations. But I grew up listening to KFWB and Huggy Boy and Doyo Del. I mean, it's a real melting pot, LA.
Absolutely, and I should say the Mexican music scene is very much in detail in the book. It's the same book with a different cover.
Oh, I like them both. It reminds me of this guy that I in Sevilla. Who did the illustration?
It's an artist. Actually, he's Canadian. His name is Alec Dempster. He's based in Mexico City, but he's originally from Canada. And there's several illustrations of his in the book throughout. So we have time for you to maybe ask me one more thing, and then I think we're gonna Okay. Now open it up to questions.
Okay, I want to ask you about meeting Rosalia. Rosalia, for you folks, is one of the most astounding singers in any language, but she's a flamenca from Catalonia. She sings flamenco, but she's not from the flamenco part of Spain. She's from the Catalonian part, which is like saying that she has the passion. It's like saying Ray Kuda's passion for the blues. You know, it's from somebody from Santa Monica. You know, her passion for flamenco was she just immersed herself in it. But you tell us how you got to meet her.
Well, I mean, you know, you send an email and you hope that someone will return it. This is basically what happened. I happen to know a music writer who writes about flamenco in Spain. And I said to him, his name is Jose Manuel. I said, Jose Manuel, by any chance do you have a way of contacting Rosalia? And he says, yes, of course. I interviewed her, you know, last year. Here it is. I said, but is she gonna reply? I mean, she's big. He goes, oh yeah. She replies to me, so I don't see why she would reply to you.
She's big.
And she replied, and she says, absolutely. I'm gonna be doing interviews. Let me put you in touch with my manager. And then the interview was organized, and I walked the Camino de Santiago with my wife for a week.
You did? Oh, wow.
You know, in northern Spain, in Galicia.
Yeah. And
on the way back, we stopped in Madrid for a couple of days, and that's when she was doing a series of interviews to promote her forthcoming album.
That was good luck. That was a piece of good luck. You happened to be in the right place.
I just happened to be there when she was doing interviews. But the crazy thing about it was walking into this 16th century palace in downtown Madrid, in these sort of Rococo hallways. I mean, just like filled with you know, statues and paintings and all kinds of stuff. And she's in there with these high-heel tennis shoes about this high, in this kind of coverall, in a white coverall, and long hair, as you see in the photo. That's my photo of her sitting on this, you know, glorious sort of couch.
Any couch she sits on is a glorious couch, Beto.
And she says, oh, you walked the Camino? She was like impressed. She says, oh, I walked it for a month.
No, because that's a serious thing. Folks, the Camino, walking Camino it's a peregrination. It's a pilgrimage that is taken every year by people who and it's in the north, it's in Galicia, right? It's in the north of Spain. And
well, it covers most of northern Spain at the border with France. It starts at the border with France and it ends in Santiago, or you could end it at the Atlantic Ocean and finish in Fisterra.
Right. But and people come from all over the world. People come from
all over the world to walk. We just walked for a week, and actually, there's a story in my book about it. If you remember,
people in LA don't walk even for 10 minutes, but so to walk for a week is pretty serious. Yeah. Well, it's such an inspiration to see this book and this compilation of all the people who you've taken the time to discover and to present to us. So it's really I like that. My book is the same color as the wall of where you keep your guitars. It's like that. You know. It's one of my favorite colors too. The maybe we should look and see what questions people are asking.
Okay. So folks, if you have any questions for either one of us, please, this is the time to do it. We have about 15 or 20 minutes left. Jackson, when is your new album coming out? This is a question from Sandy.
It's going to probably come out in June, I think. It was moved back to March, and then because of the pandemic and because of the problems with doing any kind of promotion or appearing any place, we decided to move it back a little bit further so we could maybe do some television, you know, when it's time to. So yeah, it looks now like June. Also, the question about the touring, you know, I like the tour. James Taylor is not. I think I'm supposed to wait and not say anything about it until they make the main announcement, because they don't want to announce it where it's been moved to, but it's going to be moved back a little bit. It was already postponed, you know, like it was from last year. It was postponed to May, and I probably am not supposed to say anything about it, but it's definitely happening. Everybody's kept their tickets to see. I mean, we've sold these tickets, and we're all waiting. I'm really waiting with bated breath for this tour, because his band was one of the best bands in the world. I love his songs, and I always loved James's songs. So we have a great tour planned, and my band and his band, we're all the best friends. And so it's going to be wonderful to come out of this pandemic and be able to perform, you know, in this kind of, it's just going to be glorious. So that's, if the tickets you have for, if in May, if it's postponed, it'll just be moved around to like a little bit behind the beginning of the other. So it might be, some of those initial tickets might be moved back a little bit ways. Like I said, okay. I shouldn't say anything, but my record will be timed for around that time, you know, around the middle of the summer.
There's a question if this conversation will be on Facebook. I'll have to ask maybe Christina to let us know about that. I don't know that question. Wonderful to listen to both of you. What I would like to know is where I can find The Poet of Havana. It's a documentary about Carlos Varela. She said she saw it on PBS a few years ago and would love to see it again and tell friends who missed it. It was very heartfelt and inspiring.
Yeah. As it happens, I just spoke with Ron Chapman, the guy who made that film, the Canadian who made that film, and it came out on HBO Latino before, and I think it's about to be released in a broader release. And when I say I think it is, I know it is in about a week. But you know, he told me, he gave me a link to it so that I could download it and see it, but I didn't pay attention to where it's. I can't tell you where it's going to be shown, except that look for it. Start looking for it now, or look for it in a week, and you'll find it.
All right. Big fans, my 10-year daughter and I. What's your connection between you and the Hispanic community? I noticed you have sung many songs in Spanish. Can't wait to see you in the Coachella Valley again.
Well, I grew up in Highland Park, which was, you know, largely Latino. And when I went to junior high, I was in a choir or the chorus class with some of I just fell in love with these girls, you know. I was in this great class and wonderful singing with them, and singing in a, you know, and my best friends lived 1 block away, and it was a family of like 12 kids, the oldest of which was probably old enough to be the youngest's father, but they were not. They're all like, you know, there was a huge family, and there was somebody for everybody. My sister's best friend was Susie Cantero, and was her age. My best friend was Eddie Cantero, who was my age, and my brother Severin had a best friend, Danny, who was his age. We were like a, you know, side by side families in this neighborhood. So I've always felt a real connection, you know, and also a gulf. I always wanted to know more about Latin culture, and I always thought the Spanish was so beautiful. One of my favorite books growing up, or no, not even growing up, I mean, just as I became a young man, was this book of translations of Spanish poems, many of which, some of them were Chilean, like Pablo Neruda. Some of them were Spanish, like I can't remember his name now. I mean, they were Garcia Lorca, yeah, was in this book. It was a City Lights book, maybe number 1 or number 2 or something, and it was edited by and translated by Kenneth Rexroth, and it became a real beacon for me. I love those songs, the Spanish and translation. So I made these really good friends from Nicaragua who came to stay with me in my house, and they wanted to make a record. I met them in Nicaragua, and I said, hey, well, when you come to LA, come by and we'll fool around in the studio. So like a month later, they arrived and said, we're here to make our record, you know? And I went, oh, okay, well, okay. Well, that's what we did. We sat down, we worked on a record every day, and within about a month or 6 weeks, we had a beautiful record. And that record is called Duo Guarda Barranco. And they became my really good friends. They were extreme. They were so talented. I'm still really good friends with Katia, who survives her brother, Salvador. But one of the things that happened there was that the songs needed to be translated for an American audience. And I got involved in that. And I even devised a way to project translations of their songs behind them as they sang. So there's something about the intimacy of figuring out exactly how to say in English what has been said in Spanish. And you know, you can't, it's easier to do a literal translation than it is to do a version. Versions are hard. I also did a version of one of Carlos Varela's songs that came out really good because given that it has to have the same melody, it actually wound up saying exactly the same thing. It was very lucky.
And I have to plug that right now, folks. I just watched Live in Havana, Carlos Varela in concert and Live in Havana. Highly recommended, I must say. Jackson Browne is in it. He sings this very song he just mentioned, Walls and Doors. And it is a fantastic concert. Fantastic concert. It's on Amazon, by the way. It's on Amazon.
Yeah. Well, that's probably where you're going to be able to see The Poet of Havana because it's a companion piece, isn't it? It's made.
It's not there yet.
Also made by Ron Chapman, no?
Yeah, the Live in Havana is by Ron Chapman, but the Poet in Havana is not there yet. Otherwise, I would have watched it. Although I've watched it before.
Well, I'm really glad that that's out because we drew from to make The Poet of Havana. They drew from that concert in Havana. Yeah. It's really something to see him play in Havana. You know, look, I've seen people. Okay, I brought Carlos to play at the Largo in LA 2 different times, and the first time it was without translating the words. The second time, I had a PowerPoint kind of a computer on the stage that essentially did subtitles to the songs, and everybody that came the first time came the second time because they loved him, but the second time they went, "Holy shit! Oh my God! Now I get why the Latinos next to me have tears in their eyes. Now I get why they're standing up in the middle of this performance, tears streaming on their face, and looking at him like because he's telling their truth. He's telling you the truth about their lives, and that's the thing you want to get. I mean, right now I get chills all over my arm because unless you get this translation, then you really it's just pretty music. It's beautiful music. Then I've had a feeling for it my whole life, but when you really look at what's being said, it's so eloquent, and it's every bit the match of the great poet, the great poetry, and the great lyrics in American music and American poetry. That's why they call Carlos like the Bob Dylan of Cuba, because they don't know any other. There's no other way to describe the kind of value he has to them.
That's right. So I'm just told that this is being simulcast on Facebook. For those of you who want to see it there later or share it, that's something that you can do. Congratulations to Jackson on the People's Voice Folk Award, so very deserved. Speaking truth to power. Thank you also for your generosity in performing benefits. The Critic Institute shows were so appreciated. This is from Kathy. Now from Rhonda, who says, who would you want to tour with other than James Taylor in the future that you haven't yet?
Well, there are so many. This is the thing about doing benefits. You get to play with all kinds of people that you wouldn't ordinarily be paired with, So I've been blessed by being on many bills with people that I just wouldn't have. You wouldn't book a show with me and Tom Morello unless it was a benefit and we were both there for the same reason. But I wouldn't be able to play to his audience. By the way, I've tried it. I one time opened for the. What is the name of the band he's got with Chuck D and
Public Enemy?
No, it's not Public Enemy, but it's like
Living Color.
No, it's the band they all have together. Anyway, it's just physically so much. It's the amount of sound that they put out is so concussive. It's filled this building in a way that, like, no, I could never, you wouldn't normally see me on the same stage, but we were able to do it for this inaugural ball.
Yeah.
Those are the occasions that allow me to play. But to answer your question, I don't really know. There are so many. I've gotten to play with so many people that who would I want to tour with? Well, to tell you the truth, the dream I had the other night, I thought about, but it's not going to happen because, again, but there's a singer I really, really admire named Phoebe Bridgers. If you all know Phoebe Bridgers, then you know why I would want to tour with Phoebe. She's invited me to sing with her a couple times. I sang with her on a Christmas song. I just sang with her on one of her new songs, Kyoto, and I'm going to get to do it again in a couple days because she's doing a version of that. That was for a podcast with Philip Glass and a string quartet, and she's doing another version. So, I mean, the idea of touring, but again, like I got to do a show with Jenny Lewis, and generationally speaking, a show on tour has to fit together. So you play to a combined audience, and they have to be pretty close together already.
Right.
It's pretty magical to get to play. All along, I've been very fortunate to get to play with artists whose audiences are younger. Like if I got to do some gigs in New York with Lucius, and it was great. Wow, man, my people, my audience were like, holy shit, these women are incredible. And I've gotten letters from people for really years and years saying, thank you so much for the people that you have opening for you, whether it's Kev Moe and Steve Earle or whether it's Sean Colvin. We always get there in time to see who's opening for you because we know it's going to be somebody great.
Yeah,
so
I got a chance to see Luz Casal that opened for you in Los Angeles.
Again, like, and I got to play.
Fantastic.
I got to play in Spain with David Lindley because Luz Casal was on. She agreed to do the same thing for me. She was on this bill so that we could play to a Spanish audience in San Sebastian, or maybe it was. No, it wasn't. It was near there though. Anyway, this is the thing about a tour. I got to play. One of my favorite tours was with the brother and sister part of Nickel Creek, Sean and Sarah Watkins, and they have a thing called the Watkins Family Hour. And Sarah was releasing a solo album, so I had her as the opening act. So that's simple enough. And then her brother Sean's playing with her, and this great guy Tyler Chester, who's one of the great producers of this upcoming generation, and a great bass player, a guy who played bass, guitar, and piano at the same time, and who can play. I mean, and that became. I went only with my drummer and my guitarist, and I did some sort of deconstructed songs, and then we basically became a band. And this is what happened in Haiti. We took Jonathan Wilson, who's not just one of the great producers of this generation, this young generation. He's also like an amazing drummer. He's an incredible drummer, and he'll be listening to the occasions and go, he'd know exactly how to play in order to contain or how to create a setting for this. And be able to combine the rock music that Jenny Lewis or John Russell would do, or me. And so, but anyway, what I started to say, when I went on Jenny's stage to play to her audience, I realized that there was a limited appeal for someone of my generation to that younger generation. Very hard to play to them.
All right.
One time I played a show with Pete Seeger, and Pete Seeger said, Pete Seeger was amazing. He said, we were going to play a show as a benefit. Again, that's how these things happen. He hitchhiked from upstate New York to Massachusetts with a banjo and a 12-string and a sleeping bag. He hitchhiked to the gig. Okay. Then he got there and he said, my manager told me not to do this gig because you're actually sell more tickets than I do, and you sold it so quickly that he said you're going to be playing to Jackson's audience. So, and he's kind of too big, and you're actually, you should be on the top of the bill. so we did it. And so what he said, here's what I want to do. He said, well, you sing a song and I'll sing a song, and then you sing a song and I'll sing a song. So David Linney and I did this show with him, and it was the best possible outcome, because I'd be singing, he'd sit down cross-legged on the stage, and then when I'd finish, he'd get up and say, okay, I got one. And it was really that kind of a Pete Seeger hoot, that kind of union gathering. I mean, he and my audience, of course, loved him, and I loved him every bit. But the whole questions of billing are a problem, you know, when you try to put together these different generations. And then, well, people get around it. People figure it out, you know. I don't know.
I have to, Jackson, I have to stop you there because it's 5 o'clock. We still have a few more questions, and I want to get to them. So we're going to try to answer them as quickly as possible. First of all, thank you both, Jackson. I really hope to have the chance to see you again, perhaps in Germany. Have you made any concerts in other Latin American countries besides Chile? All right, so if you could answer that quickly, any other country besides Chile?
No, I haven't. Again, I'm told I can play in South America and Latin countries, and that I'm known there. But so far, we haven't figured out how to make that happen. I know that you invited me to play in
Mexico.
Yeah, in Mexico, and I never could figure out how to do it. Part of it has to do with getting there with my guitars and making sure I get home with the guitars too.
All right. Here's from Elizabeth David. It's a question for me. I look forward to reading your book, Beto. Can you talk a little about women in mariachi music? Also, what took you from Boulder to LA? All right. Two questions. Women in mariachi, historically, there's always been women in mariachi music, going back to the 50s, both in Mexico and here in the US. As it happens in Los Angeles, there is a great culture of mariachi, of women mariachi bands. There must be, and I've done a little research on that because there's a story in my book about it. There's roughly between 10 and 15 women mariachi bands in Los Angeles. So the culture here is very deep, very strong. It has to do everything with education and with, you know, the interest of also, in particular, this one mariachi leader, Jose Hernandez, whose Mariachi Sol de Mexico, you know, ushered in the new kind of generation of mariachi musicians, and he himself wanted to create an all-women band, an all-women mariachi band, and so he founded, of course, inviting, you know, about 10, 12 women to create what's called the sort of one of the leading mariachi bands, women mariachi bands in the country, Mariachi Reina de Los Angeles. So there's you can read much more about what I'm saying here in the book, because I interview several people and they give you information about it. So, is there a place in the world where you feel the most interesting music is now happening? That sounds like a comment from Books and Books. That's tough. I think that every country, every region has a lot of great music happening. At times, it feels like Colombia is exploding with amazing music. At times, Cuba is happening. Other times, it's Mexico. Other times, it's Mali. You know, or Spain, for example. You know, when you have someone like Rosalia, suddenly, you know, attention is in Spain for some reason. So anyway, it really depends. It's a long, complicated question.
It's so interesting, Beto, because it's global. Music has become so global, especially in a time when concerts happen virtually. And I mean, Rosalia, I'd seen her playing on my friend is her accompanist and a producer of her solo album. So she was this incredible flamenco who could sing with one guitarist. And the next thing she did was she was this gigantic phenomenon with all the playing huge festivals and crossing over to a rap, to a hip hop audience globally. Because the music has really become global. You like the band I mentioned to you, Rumba Madre. They're from 3 different countries. They've come together and they have their roots in all these different places. So I'm sure that there are scenes where things break out, like sometimes it'll be Miami and it'll be, LA, be like, but it's also that there are fewer and fewer boundaries to people really getting in touch with the music in these different places. From there's huge, it's just a global current happening now.
Yeah. Okay, the second question that I didn't answer is, why did you move from Boulder to Los Angeles? Well, it's sort of a personal thing. I was separating from my first marriage, and I felt like I wanted to go somewhere where I really felt I would be nurtured and inspired to get into more music. And I lived in California before. I lived actually in the Bay Area in Palo Alto when I was a teenager with an American family, and I learned English there with them. So I always had this thing about California. So living in Colorado for 10 years was great. Don't get me wrong. I loved it. I went to college there.
Yeah, Colorado's the other California.
Yeah. So I felt like, I got to go to California. So LA was the place to go. So I chose LA, and that's why I'm here. And I think we have maybe one or two more questions. Have you thought about doing a book together, a book with CD about the power of music to break down barriers, heal, and inspire cross-cultural understanding? I'm not sure if this is for you or for me, Jackson.
Well, clearly, neither one has thought about working a book together yet. But I mean, you have this book that Beto has just put out, which is really essentially just that. It is a bridge. It's a bridge to a culture that is happening in so many different countries. Maybe it's about Latin music, but it's really about countries all over the world. You have stuff here from Spain and from South America and from North America. As far as doing a book together, I mean, I'm a songwriter, which means that it's a very different form than I can't write prose. I can't even write a postcard. So I don't think I can write a book.
Here's for you, Jackson. Any chance you and David Lindley will perform live or virtually again?
I don't know. I tell you what, I'm involved in trying to make a film about David Lindley, and maybe that there might be some way to do some performing together in that film. It's an open-ended project right now. We were sort of it was halted by the pandemic, just as we had found a director, and just as we were beginning to talk with the company about funding. But I'm holding a lot of film and recordings that David Lindley and I have done together. So I'm a part of his movie. And he certainly would be a huge part of my movie. So there might be some kind of performance together at some time. He's always in the back of my mind. We toured together as recently as I think 1997, or no, maybe even since then, like 2006, something. He's in the back of my mind always. So yeah, I would say probably at some point we'll do more. I don't know if touring though. We're getting pretty long in the tooth to be touring, And the thing is about David is he's finishing an album of his own, so he's very resilient. I mean, he will get in the car and drive to Edmonton, Canada from Los Angeles to do a gig, and he'll put it together a few like, I don't mean a car, a van with one other guy, and he'll just drive to Canada, do the gigs, a few gigs, and then drive home. It's like, so we tour on a different scale, I couldn't do that. Yeah. When he tours with me, it's like Club Med for him. He's like, everybody. You have and there's really I joked the other day. There's almost only one of the best, the most valuable things about touring is that the way I tour is that we have servants. In a way, like having a crew to lift all your stuff means you can carry it. You can bring all the instruments you want to bring. And there's somebody to lift them, to put them in place every day, and you don't have to do it. Well, Lindley, he loads the van. He loads it into the gig and he loads it out of the gig. That's pretty amazing for someone
Jackson, you were. I have to ask you about this. And by the way, we're gonna allow a few more minutes, maybe 5 more minutes. We're gonna go. If anybody has any more questions, we're happy to entertain him while Jackson answers this one. You were on a trip to Mexico with none other than your good friend Linda Ronstadt.
Yeah.
Both of you came up together sort of around the same time. You were obviously very close friends with what became the Eagles, and she. There's a story about that it used to be her band that was
they formed as
with her, and then it became the Eagles.
Yeah.
Tell us about the experience of being with her in Mexico, Mexican music, which a lot of people don't know that her thing was Mexican music for a long time.
I don't think people realize that she was Mexican, but she never disguised it or hidden it. She was just also so, American, like through and through. She just bridged both worlds effortlessly. She's from Tucson, so she's right there from that border area of Tucson and Sonora. To go to the town that her grandfather was born in was a pilgrimage for her and for the group Los Senzoles, the cultural group from the Bay Area, from Richmond, Eugene Rodriguez, my good friend. And she turned me on to them. She's called me one day and said, like, just some people I think you should meet. And they've played with Ry Cooder and David Hidalgo and Taj Mahal, and you should know them too. So it was like being invited to be friends with, invited into the company of players that, and it turned, and I'm the slowest writer I know of, but I mean, a song that I'd been trying to write for many years, Eugene joined up with me and we wrote this song, which I think one of my best songs, called The Dreamer. And it was a real collaboration where we really, collaborated back and forth. Unlike so many collaborations where like somebody writes a little bit and the other one finishes it, like this is slightly back and forth. We went to Mexico, and there's this town which is pristine. It's in a part of the Sonoran Desert that is sort of not the territory of this huge drug trafficking cartel, and it's not the territory of the other. It's sort of in this great, pristine farming area that was once the sort of wheat belt, maybe still produces wheat, so that all the tortillas are flour tortillas, which are interesting. They really have their thing. It's very hard to find a corn tortilla and a tortilla de maíz in Banachami, but this is where her grandfather grew up, and it's a beautiful town. And we went there it's a little town, and then we played there, and I didn't play. The folkloric ensemble teamed up with a folkloric dance ensemble that were sort of champion folk dancers who demonstrate not only the costumes but the dances. And they're like rock stars, these kids. They go to every fair, they go to every gathering. They make it a fiesta because they play but the difference is that they play to recorded music, but they change costumes and they do these incredible dances, and so athletic and so strong. But it's not really a fiesta if you don't have these dances going on. But Los Senzoles from the Bay Area are really more like, these kids really play the instruments. And this is why Linda loves them so much and why she's mentored them and sponsored them. Maybe mentors, I think it's a good term, even though she hasn't taught them to play. She's a beacon, and she's a beacon and a kind of and a huge influence and a mentor to everybody that knows her. You're trying to make me wind this up, but I can't say enough. I'll just say that it was the experience of a lifetime to get to travel with Linda in Mexico and to go see where her family is from and where she is revered. She's revered because the mariachi. I mean, it didn't have to do with the fact that she's from there so much as the fact that when she did mariachi music, she did it so well. It was one of the biggest records ever.
I should add, there is a story about Linda Ronstadt in that particular part of her life in the book. It's in the section of the chapter called Identity, and there's also a story about Los Ensontles in the book, in the same section. So for people who may not know who Los Ensontles are, it's in the book as well. We have 2 more comments, and I think we're going to wrap it up. Someone just commented and said, Kathy says, Jackson, I'll be your ghostwriter. Talking about the book. And then the final question is, which will help us kind of, I guess I'm going to ask you to kind of find a way to wrap this up. How you think our new president is doing?
Great. I think he's doing great. I mean, it is such a relief to have a real president. It's like it's a combination of, okay, back to normal, but things will never be the same. Things can never be the same after the 4 years we've just had, and I think that because those 4 years disclosed some of the deeper divisions, the most deep divisions in our society, we really have such a job ahead of us, and we have to be more devout and more intense and more dedicated in all work that we do, whether it's whether you call it community work or whether you call it revolutionary work. I really think that we all need to support this, whether we believe in the Democratic Party or not. Many of us are more progressive than the Democrats will ever be. Many of us don't have misgivings about government, period. I've always had misgivings about electoral politics, but I'll tell you, I'm very grateful that we've have this opportunity to come to the fore and make something of the next 2 and 4 years to try to present an alternative to the absolute corrupt and cynical governance we've had for the last 4 years. Well, of course, we have the responsibility to change our history and to heal the wounds of history and the divisions of the past. And it's a formidable task, and we might not make it. I mean, I really do think that it's not only our country, but our style of government that is hanging in the balance. So, but I do think that they're off to a good start. I do.
And we're going to close actually with a comment by Amy, who says, "Things will never be the same, but as you say, thank God. Hopefully, we will have learned that democracy and human care are action verbs."
That's good.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Jackson. This has been just fantastic.
I had no idea that Jackson Browne, you have un corazón latino. I had no idea. That is such an interesting revelation. And you have such a great sense of humor, too.
Oh, thank you.
I want to thank you both for being here with us. If there's anything that can unify people, I think it's music. It brings people together. The more fusion, the better. I love the fact that you have a chapter that is on the power of women. We didn't talk enough about that, but I wanted to.
We talked about Linda Ronstadt and her power.
We only talked about the women. Wicca, Rosalia, Linda Ronstadt.
Mariachi women.
Should go on tour with Phoebe Bridgers and Rosalia.
Oh, yeah.
That would be amazing. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, for being here in our little virtual bookshop, which is very community oriented. I want to remind everyone that's watching from everywhere that you can just hit the green button. You'll get a copy of the book. We'll ship it right out to you, or you can pass by one of our stores if you're in Miami and pick it up. And just thank you so much. I hope we can do this in person someday in the near future.
You're going to have one of these.
Music stories.
I'm going to go order one of the black ones. I want a black one, too.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just a clarification. The book that Jackson has is longer. It's 380 pages. It has black and white photographs, which I mostly took myself. This one is shorter. It's just the text. It's 240 pages. So here's the difference.
Oh, wow.
See
That is a big difference.
You shouldn't have told him that.
Well,
I don't know where I got this.
Obviously, one is more expensive than the other. So, but we wanted to make it accessible to everybody. And I want to thank Mitch Kaplan for his invitation. Who's really kind of the one that helped to make this happen.
Huge music lover. Absolutely. And a big fan. All right. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you, Jackson.
All right. Great to see you.
Muchas gracias.